welcome to another episode of the One Life Podcast. In week number 2 now of At the Movies, coming off the movie Unbroken. And just to remind our listeners, you have to be in the room to experience it. It's not on YouTube. It's not on Facebook. So if you haven't seen it, go watch the movie Unbroken because we're about to talk about it.
This is probably the one, well, there's a couple. This is like the one movie that I would say, hey, it's totally appropriate. I can 100% recommend that. Coda the week before, so I'm going to go watch that movie. I'm like, hey, make sure your kids aren't in the room.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of editing that goes into that, but this is one.
It is a little violent.
There is some violence.
Like little kids.
That is the thing that I would just caution. And that one moment where I tell people, hey, I even thought about putting that in, but it'd be too extreme.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to make people like laugh and tug on their heartstrings while they're eating their popcorn and not have to look away.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Unbroken's a fantastic
So
movie.
let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Louis Zamperini. Am I saying that right?
Nicely done.
Okay. So talk a little bit about his story. And we've kind of talked off air on some things that even the movie didn't cover, but kind of break down for us the movie Unbroken.
So, I mean, it's a story of this kid, right? I resonated with it. Amanda definitely resonated with it because he's an Italian household. There
you go.
So he grew up Italian. So a lot of like the stuff in the movie picks up. It just kind of reminds Amanda of, very, very similar to her upbringing. And then obviously he finds this gift that he's incredibly fast and was breaking records in high school. If you look back at his career, I think he has like the 1,500 meter, which is just shy of a mile, or like 3:40 or something like that. And the 5K, which is what he went to the Olympics to run, was like 14-minute 5K back then, 1936, or almost like 90 years ago. I mean, that's unheard of. Off air, Dave was just saying that one of the coolest shots in that movie is like the old shoes and the spikes and. Yeah, and to think of how far technology has come today, and for him to run that fast all the way back then is just wild. So he has this incredible gift, goes to the Berlin Olympics right before World War II. I think he gets 8th place in the Olympics, and then obviously World War II breaks out, and he's drafted, I believe, to be in the Air Force.
Wow.
So and then obviously the story of him, the airplane crashing, surviving, was it 47?
47 days, yeah. That's crazy.
7 days. I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of the story. And then then the movie tells the story like that we focused on. But what it didn't tell you is that right after he's released, gets back home, he suffers from severe PTSD. I mean, like 10 years. He would wake up in the middle of the night and have dreams that he was strangling his captors back in Japan. So suffered from alcoholism, was married to Cynthia. She comes to faith in Jesus through a Billy Graham crusade.
Wow.
10 years. She's married to Louis. He's suffering from alcoholism, all of these terrible nightmares, these dreams. And then she begs him 10 years later to go to a Billy Graham crusade. He reluctantly goes, gives his life to Jesus, complete, life transformation.
Yeah.
Then he sets out on the mission to fulfill the promise, back when he was surviving on that raft boat of like making his life count. So, and goes back in the story, I think at the end, the credits, it tells you like he goes back, meets with most of the captors. The only person that wasn't was the bird. But it's a story, like, there's so many different angles you could take with this movie. Story of forgiveness, but I mean, it's just surviving the hardship, right? If you can take it, you can make it. And I think right now that's the message I think our people needed to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, incredible. Really so the question that, just always, why'd you choose this movie?
Right, yeah.
So a student in our church 2 years ago at the Movies series is like, Pastor, it would be a great movie. I'm like, what? He's like, the movie Unbroken. And he's researched Louis' life, did a whole paper on him, and he actually went to California, where Louis is from, and saw the high school, and they've since named the track after Louis Zamperini.
Oh, wow.
So there's pictures of this student, his name is Nathan, and he's running on Louis Zamperini's track, and he's like all bought in to the movie, to his life, and he's like, I think you should do it. So huge shout out to Nathan for the encouragement to do to do Unbroken.
Yeah, it's cool.
A lot of other pastors have done it too.
Mm.
So I'm not the first one. So, you begin to like network and figure out. Nobody else took this approach with it of the hearts. If you're in the middle of a trial, like this message is for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, really powerful story. Another great response from our people.
Mm-hmm. So as we transition, right? Like what are some things you would say, like specifically this week, like your trials, your tribulations, like what as you look at Louis' story, and I think sometimes we can view our trials and tribulations as like really difficult, and then we watch a story like that and we're like, okay, I wasn't 47 days I didn't go to these prisoner camps, right? So now like the other side of that can sometimes be the tendency of like, well, it's fine, it's whatever, I'm just going to get through it. But talk to the person that's like they're struggling with things, maybe not to that extreme, right? Probably definitely not to that extreme, but just the feeling of like I'm going through a slight difficulty, or my kid is frustrating me, or he's struggling in school, like the smaller trials. That sometimes it seems like the enemy just has a little bit of a nudge. Maybe it's not a stabbing, but it's like a little bit of a nudge in our side to keep us from finding joy. So talk about that. Like, what would you tell that parent, that person that is going through that trial and tribulation?
A couple of things immediately come to my mind of like, hey, that's normal. Like Jesus said, you're going to have trouble in this life. So it's trials and temptations and all that. It's a normal part of life. So when people are going through it, I just like to call them like, hey, you're normal. It's okay. And then if you even go back to our message from last week in Coda, that if you're trying to take steps to follow Jesus, expect some trials to come your way. Okay, so I think that's just a proper framework. But second, like the encouragement from the passage is like, hey, no trial lasts forever. So if you can take it, you can make it. So then in the middle of that trial, you have to have the end game in mind. Like this is a season. So people always tell me like my life is ruined. And I'm like, no. Maybe this season of your life is ruined. That's your words, or challenged, or different than what you thought. But your life is definitely not ruined. So having that in mind as well is again helpful. And then just knowing, man, like if you have, so here's my last 10%. It's normal. It's a season. But if you don't have good people around you that you can like lean into and talk, and mentors that have gone through other things, like that season might last longer than it should.
Yeah.
So I always would say, get the right people around you that have already solved some of the issues that you're going through. And I think that season's going to be much shorter than what you even realized. So that's my 10%. And then that's what the church, and that's the beautiful thing of the local church, right? That's why we're here. So it's normal. It's a season, but if you get the right people, right counsel around you, that season's probably going to be much shorter than what you think.
Yeah.
And then I would look in their eyes and just tell them like, you can do this. I know you don't think you can. I know the struggle with your child or the struggle in your marriage, but if you both work at it and put the effort into it and stop sweeping things under the rug, and like bring it to light, like you can make it.
Yeah, that's good.
It's the moment that you lie about it, like hide, keep things in the dark. That's when the season continues to last and last and last and last. So that's my encouragement for anyone right now that's going through a really dark time. I mean, get some people around you, bring it to light, and that season will be shorter than you think. How about you? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think ultimately, the two different sides of that are to validate that you're concerned. So like the dark side is there, right? And difficulties and trials, tribulations, but then the lighter things that just seem to be annoying.
Yeah.
Like to validate some of those of like, like the enemy, sometimes the enemy strategy is not just to blow up your life, it's to annoy you and keep some of the happiness there, right? So, or away from you there. So just like be encouraged through that season. Same thing, right? Just like the things that are the big issues are a season, some of those annoying things that you can't push away, like those are seasons too.
That's a really good point. I think that's exactly what James is talking about when he says, hey, count it like all joy when you do fall into trials and tribulation. Because if you don't like have the proper perspective, it's gonna rob you of your joy. So we joke about this as a staff. Like I'm like, when things creep up in the weirdest times, the best thing that you can do is laugh about it. Like, of course, the evil one would bring that up right now.
Yeah.
In the moment that you just like put language around that and just laugh about it, it disarms it, and then you're able to get through it. because then it's no longer an issue between me and anybody else. It's just an issue. And that's probably, I'm glad you said that. That's probably the best thing that you can do when the trials come up, which is why James talks about it all the time, like count it all joy, brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it's going to rob your joy.
Yeah.
So be proactive about it.
I think the pain too, like I've used the illustration before, but the pain of the chipping away,
Yeah.
right? Michelangelo, when he's asked about sculpting David, he said, well, it was easy. I just took away everything that didn't look like David, right? And somehow the pain sometimes, God as our creator, as our sculptor, is creating us in the image of his son. And sometimes that can be painful. He's chipping away everything that looks like us to make him look like Jesus.
So we talked about, like, there's always purpose. God never wastes the pain. And if the sooner you can get to that, to start looking at it from that perspective, the better you're going to be. And I'm not minimizing the difficulty and the tribulation that you're going through. Please do not misunderstand. I'm not saying, oh, just get over it. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I used to tell it to my wife when we first got married. No, it's okay. Just get over it. Like, that does not go well. And don't tell it to anybody. Like, no, it's real. It's painful. But, man, God is doing something. The way my pastor used to tell me that while it feels like God's delaying, he's always doing something deeper. Deeper than what you can see. So that perspective has helped me so much of, like, it's not working into my timeline, and I can't seem to plow through this barrier in my personal life or the church. And man, when God delays, he's probably doing something deeper inside of you that you don't even realize that needs to be done for you to even get to that next level.
Yeah.
So that's my encouragement.
All right, we'll talk about the next couple weeks. We have not only like week 3 of At the Movies coming up, but then talk a little bit about that and the vision nights and some things happening within the church.
Hey, glad you brought it up. So 3 more weeks of At the Movies. Again, I just can't tell you enough. Like, invite. It's the best series of the entire year. The next 3 are really great. I think people are going to have a lot of fun with them, and they're probably familiar movies. Let me say it that way.
All right.
Okay, so then we had the vision nights. Really excited to kind of announce to our church that we are changing some of the things in our bylaws, our statement of faith. We're just strengthening we're not changing it, we're just strengthening our statement of faith. And then we're presenting bylaws that reflect a multi-site church and a much larger church than what we were when those were written 8 years ago. Nothing wrong with the bylaws. It's just not conducive to us moving forward, and actually for where we even are now as a multi-site church. So we're going to clean and clear some of those things up. But the thing that I just want people to know, like, that's one thing. But the thing that I'm really excited to tell people is just the vision pieces that we have coming, like the Mesa Outreach Center, the Superior Campus, maybe even a little carrot, some things about our East Mesa campus that, if people at our Mesa campus, they just don't know. So just talking about, one church, multiple locations eventually, and getting language around that. And then casting the vision for our big year-end offering, our Make a Difference offering, which is December 14 and 15. And what this offering is this year, it'll fund all outreach and missions for the next year. So we actually don't keep any of that offering. That all goes back out our doors through our community partners, church planting, missions. And so it's like it's over and above what people normally give. And it's just, hey, we're just closing the vision gap for where we believe God wants to take us outreach in the next year. So that'll be fun to share some vision around that as well. So that's
really
where we're going.
excited for that. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Fun.
All right. Well, remember, the church is not a building we sit in, but it's a movement we get to be a part of to help reach one more life for Jesus.